Would you Adam and Eve it? I've got a guest on the show. What's poppin', guys? Welcome back to Football Therapy with me, your host Jan. I hope you're doing well as always. I genuinely, really do hope that. Yeah, I got a guest on today. It's been a while, possibly years here on the channel. But yeah, trying out some new software. Apologies, I screwed up the settings with my microphone. Spoiler, I got Alex Goldberg on, a friend of mine, Chelsea content creator. His microphone sounded bellissimo. This sounds great, but I was using a different format, the Mac Studio camera, as well as microphone. I'm going to try and normalize audio a little bit, but apologies for that. Should I do this guest feature again, if you guys want it, I will of course ensure that this bad boy is being used for proper audio. So yes, I got Alex on and we spoke about Enzo Maresca. He's the Chelsea manager. Is he good enough? Has he been dealt a bad hand? Will he get better? Will his football get better? Was it better before? So many questions, and we have the answers. So as always, I'll thank you for joining me. If you do like the content, let me know by dropping a like on the video. And if you want more content from yours truly, why not subscribe? And a little bit of a housework reminder that I am uploading daily on the second channel, Football Yannick, which is of course non-Chelsea content, but football content, which I thoroughly enjoy at the moment. So do go show some sweet love and affection on that. So yeah, thanks to Alex for coming on, and let's get into the segment. Right guys, I'm here with Mr. Alex Goldberg to talk Chelsea and Enzo Maresca for this video. I do want to say, Alex, I've known him for a while now. I think he's, without blowing too much smoke, I do think he's quite an exceptional interviewer of content creators, I've noticed lately, to pay him a compliment there, while also maintaining his inherent shouty Boston sports style, you know, so it's not all sunshine. So thanks for look, new vibes here on Football Therapy, trying an interview collab. I've jumped on his playback channel a few times recently, highly recommend. If you especially want to hear yours truly speak about Chelsea, go check out, is it Alex Goldberg or is it still the byline?
Alex Goldberg. We've dropped the byline, yeah. Okay,
Alex Goldberg on playback. So welcome, Alex. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Jan. Nice to be with you. And yeah, I don't think I can ever drop the shouty Bostonian arrogance. But it really isn't a real arrogance. It's just like a fake surface level arrogance.
It's your culture, man. Yeah, no, yeah. It's fine. It's part of it. Yeah. It's part of the mystique of Alex Goldberg, and that's what we love it, man. So yes, obviously, I feel like I'm in my like Yannick is on Chelsea podcast vibes. What a throwback! I mean, obviously we've got the cameras on us, but I feel like I need to relax, have a glass of whiskey like I used to, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, nostalgic. We are here to talk Chelsea. I want to talk about the Chelsea manager. I know the issue that one of the biggest. I know a lot of criticism going at the ownership, the directors, and whether that's right in some aspects. The owners aren't going anywhere anytime soon, despite certain people's wishes and desires. I'm sort of quite philosophical and pragmatic about that. And I think definitely rightly in many ways, the sporting directors have been taking a lot of heat, but I can't see them just suddenly being fired and going. As always, the buck stops with the gaffer. And by all accounts, he's being backed by the project, so I figured we'd talk about him a little bit. He's been catching some heat, and while I'm not like a devout Maresca Chelsea fan, I do quite like him, and I do think he's pretty good. I know Alex has been defending him lately, so I thought he'd be a good person to bring on and just discuss, and just, hopefully everyone can listen to this with an open state of mind, whether you're, with the manager or criticising the manager. So I thought it was a good opportunity to discuss this with Alex, who I think's, in terms of football fandom or sports fandom, he's a great person to discuss this stuff with. So I'm delighted to have him on. And I did want to start with a pretty heavy talking point. One of the biggest criticisms of Maresca. Of course, we started really well, scoring a lot of goals. Feels a million years away now, but it wasn't that long ago when he was constantly being posed the question, are Chelsea in a title race? A question that he just wafted away and said absolutely not. We're scoring a lot of goals, and now we're not. And there's been a criticism thrown at Maresca that perhaps he was benefiting of, the arse end of the Pochettino free-flowing football, and now he's coached that out of them into some sort of benign, toothless football. I'm very interested in getting your take on that. I'll just quickly, without hopefully leading the witness, because people on the channel know my opinion. Although I think Pochettino's bowl accounts one of the nicest guys in the world, which I think is very important. A good coach, and the players liked him. I did never feel sort of safe while we've been coached by him. And I was actually calling out for a little bit of more of a systemic style of football, just to offer like a calming longevity. What do you think about our change of fortunes in terms of the football, the goals scored, and perhaps this idea that they were still benefiting off the Pochettino vibes and that's now gone?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because in analyzing Maresca, I try and not think about Poch as much as possible, only just because I want to give Maresca his own clean slate. Sure, it is still a lot of the same players as last season, but it's not all. I mean, as much as I was okay with moving on from Conor Gallagher, that's one player I would like to highlight that Maresca does not have, right? And I think that's extra important in a season like this because although Gallagher had his inefficiencies, and like I said, probably because of those inefficiencies, I was okay with moving on from him. You got Gallagher and replaced him with nothing that Conor Gallagher brings to the table. You got rid of him, and you replaced with no grit, no energy, no tireless worker in the team. You already have Caicedo who does that, but you had Caicedo last season who did that. So you had Gallagher on top of that. And I think that Pochettino, especially with his chaotic style, really benefited from the fact that Gallagher kind of plugs and plays into that chaotic style. Yes. And you saw once Enzo was out with his hernia that, okay, Chelsea just basically won games towards the end of the season off energy and desire. I mean, maybe some things were cleaned up. I'm not denying that maybe some things were cleaned up towards the end of the season, but that chemistry between Caicedo and Gallagher looked a heck of a lot better. That's not what you're going to win a Premier League with. Like, you got to have a better composed midfield overall and a better team. But you can win a lot of games in this league, Jan. I don't need to tell you, but you can win a lot of games in this league with energy, heart, grit, desire, right? A little bit of character. And I think Maresca has had to come into this season without a Gallagher, without a Thiago Silva. That's another one. I know he wasn't a big player for Chelsea last season, but he was still there, right? He was still a calming presence. He was still there for the center backs to kind of feed off of. And Maresca hasn't had a replacement for Silva, unless you count Tosin, right? But no offense to Tosin, that is not a replacement for Thiago Silva. True. No Gallagher replacement. João Felix was brought in. That was not from Maresca. That was just to make sure the relationship with Jorge Mendes stayed kosher, right? I mean, so many moves happened over the summer. They weren't for Maresca. And Maresca's been asked to come in, and he's been asked to not just be a first-year head coach in the Premier League, right? His first ever season being a head coach in the Premier League. It's only his second full season period, right? He had the Parma season, but now Leicester last season and Chelsea this season. And so he's been asked to be head coach of Chelsea and the captain of Chelsea, all in the first season. And the reason why I say that is like, there's not a reference point in the team to go to Maresca or for Maresca to go to them and say, you know, how do we do things around here? Or how should I speak to this guy? Or how should I speak to that guy? Or just someone who would take it upon themselves to speak to the younger players. It's a brand new baby team. You know, I don't mean that in a condescending way. It's just it's a team full of babies, factually, if you want to compare their ages to the rest of the Premier League. It's by far the youngest team in the Premier League. He's one of, the most inexperienced head coaches in the league. So he's been asked to be the head coach, be the captain all at once. There's not an Azpilicueta. Jan, there's not even a Seamus Coleman. You know, like, I don't even need the guy to play, but there's not even a reference point of, like, this is how we do things here, right? Yeah. So, of course, like, everybody's happy when you're playing good football. In the first half of the season, I don't think it had much to do with Poch and the carryover from Poch last season, how the season ended. Just teams tried to play football against Chelsea the first half of the season. And Maresca, he showed this with Leicester first half of the season last season, that he can coach a pretty good brand of football, fairly exciting and attacking, if, of course, it's not against a Park side. And also, we have the players for it. Nicholas Jackson, right, for all his inefficiencies, really good, coming to show for the ball. Caldwell, line-breaking pass, finds Jackson, lays it off to Palmer or Madueke. Like, these are some guys that are pretty good on the counter if you want to press up, in front of them, like Brighton chose to, like West Ham chose to. We played a really good brand of football. And now, just to get to this point that we're sitting here in the moment, well, Jackson and Madueke, for all the frustrations they cause fans, I know they have a long way to go, but they have been injured, and they really are important just overall for guys like Cole Palmer and the overall team and how Maresca wants to play. Nani, right, being a very, isolated winger out wide, keeping the width, the touchline winger that Maresca likes. And Jackson, I know Jackson was in a bad rut, but you still see the difference in how we play when he's out there versus out there.
So important systemically.
It's so important. So it's been the perfect storm of injuries, but also teams, managers have said, we got to stop trying to play football against Chelsea. We got to just go with the terrorist low block. And listen, does Maresca need to try some other things out? Probably. But I just don't know how we can sit here and say, oh, Maresca just naturally plays some awful brand of football. He wants the players to play slow. He's this negative manager. I think that's just being so reactive and not taking into account all of the context as to why we got here.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I want to pick up on a couple of things. I broadly agree as well. I love that Seamus Coleman comment because it made me think of like the difference between Chelsea and Arsenal the other day. That was one of the most awful games of football ever. They had a pretty average central midfielder playing as a striker in the box. And now, obviously, you were using Seamus Coleman as leadership and set standard settings, but he's not like a Galactico. It just shows if you're missing a sort of fundamental piece. Like, we have no presence in the box and no crosses in the box, no touches in the box. But they literally just put a big guy in there and it made a difference.
Yeah,
it just shows how lacking we are to like a laughable degree. That Arteta, I know he wants to play big bruising football all the time, but he's still a progressive young coach to a degree, and he was like, screw it, we'll put a sort of a central midfielder up there and just see if he can win headers. It got him 3 points against Chelsea for a weird scuffed header. So that, not just in leadership, but just sort of primitive, basic functionality of the fundamentals of football we're missing. We could talk about the goalkeeper as well, which I don't think we're going to waste their time here because everyone's aligned on that. But just before we move on in terms of like the style of football, yes, I totally agree, hamstrung by injuries and stuff. Something that I wanted to talk about as well, so I'm glad you brought it up. But we do know with Maresca that when we were playing this lovely football, often transitional, playing on the break, he was, and this is something Liam Twomey of The Athletic often echoed and wrote about, that Maresca didn't really like it. And like he doesn't want it a basketball game, as he calls it, whereas actually a lot of and again this will come to squad building, which we'll discuss. Chelsea's players are set up to be really effective in transitional football right now. That's just the kind of dynamic players we've got. But he wasn't liking it, and he was like, yeah, we're scoring goals, but this isn't the idea. Like, this isn't why I'm here. This isn't the sporting director's plan. We want, to strangle possession. We want field tilt up the pitch. We want to, not let the opposition feel like they've got a chance, feel like they're in the game. And I kind of subscribe to all that, like break their mentality, because we're a bunch of infants that aren't confident and severely lacking in places on the pitch, we end up in scenarios where actually we do imbue them with a lot of belief. So it's kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do. But so that is another thing to consider in this discussion about, we started well. Of course, the teams against us have changed to a degree. Of course, we're lacking players. But we know he didn't fundamentally want to play that. For better or for worse, like, transitional football's fun and exciting. But last season, Pochettino was vibes transition all the way. And again, I'm not a Pochettino hater because I'm quite like emotional, compassionate guy generally in life, and apparently Pochettino is one of the soundest guys ever. And I'm not one of these people that always Tottenham or whatever. I don't think necessarily he ever tried to bond with Stamford Bridge, probably quite, because he's been careful. But for me, the most un-Chelsea thing in the world was conceding a record amount of goals when we had more better players as well, like you say, leaders. For me, that's the most un-Chelsea thing, just basically getting turned over and eating loads of goals. And, you know, obviously we're moaning about that 1-0 loss against Arsenal, that weird Marino header, but it was 5-0 last season. But I by no means romanticise about that football under Pochettino at all, because for me it was like, well, this is just untenable long term. You know, this is not a plan. And I guess maybe in that sense I'm aligning myself with the sporting directors. I was like, well, this just simply isn't a plan. Like, we vibed our way into top 6 with a 5-game winning run at the end.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was great, and it, you know, fine, and I commend it, but none of those games you were like, yeah, we got this. Do you know what I mean? It was just like, whoa! It was like, and that is not a plan. So I kind of get it, but what are your thoughts on, like, so this kind of takes me on to another question. I'm just going to check my notes very quickly. In terms of, yes, what do you think about that, about what he wants against when we're playing well, and do you think the finished desired effect brand of Maresca ball will be entertaining, like if he gets to do what he wants?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to argue that basketball is the most entertaining style of football, chaos, then okay, fine. But like you said, that's not really a sustainable way to go. And also, there's just too many variables that can then sprout, right? So you will have just games where, like you said, maybe you win 5 on the bounce like you did under Poch, but never at any point do you feel overly comfortable. Like you said, Maresca didn't necessarily love some of those wins at the start of the season because we might score 4 goals, but we were shipping 2, and it just felt like we didn't have the proper control. He is from the Pep Guardiola school, so to speak, so he does like some control. But I also don't think that right now is also what he's looking for, right? Where, you know, there's a deep block that he's always facing. He doesn't have a striker, doesn't have a touchline winger, and it kind of has to just be predicated off of Cole Palmer maybe making something out of nothing. I think ideally Maresca wants probably a happy medium, right? I think Maresca... Really, this is tough to say because I don't necessarily think a first-year head coach deserves certain players. But then again, like if you're the sporting directors, why would you not want to give your head coach the right players? Just because
if he's his guy, their guy,
right?
You know,
right? Why make it about, oh well, we're not going to give you the players that you should have until year 3? Hello, it directly reflects how you do your job too, sporting directors. So there's no point in sabotaging your head coach. So, you know, I think, and I mean, I think it's more than just a thought. I think it is true. I think in an ideal world, Maresca wanted Romeo Lavia fit from the get-go, because that's a player right there where, you know, I pause when one of my co-hosts says that we miss Lavia, because I don't think you can miss something you really have never had, right? Like Lavia's, you know, Lavia's never really been part of our actual side. But I think we do kind of miss the idea of Lavia, where Caicedo and Enzo are phenomenal in their own way. But Lavia is this guy who is a controller but progresses it quick, right? So if the other side's going to...
Very sorry to interrupt. Just to compound what you're saying, it's like last season with Nkunku. Because obviously we planned the whole pre-season with Nkunku. The idea of him, obviously we were then blessed with the phenomenon that is Cole Palmer, but it's similar. Like this is how the attack's going to work. It's almost like this is how the midfield's going to work. So it's in theory, right? That's just as an example.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. So I think the idea of Lavia, and of course there's a history there with Lavia, Maresca, Joe Shields, the Manchester City history. You know, like they were putting, I don't want to say all their eggs into Lavia basket, but a decent amount. And Lavia is that player who, of course, like if you park it against Chelsea, he can move it quicker from side to side, right? Like that's how you break down a low block, Jan, right? Like you go left to right quick, not slow, quick, you know, like you have to.
Well, he starts. If Liverpool got their way and they managed to sign him, he'll be starting for the Premier League winning team right now.
I absolutely believe so as well. Yeah, he's got to be fit. But so any phase, though, even if for some reason we are deep, you know, we have to progress from deep. I mean, he's incredible at getting the ball from the center backs, turning to his left, turning to his right. So I think Maresca was looking for ideally a controller that in any kind of game style was able to move it quick, progressively from side to side. Also, I mean, I think you saw... It was going to take a little bit of time with the defense, right? I mean, ideally, you want to put Maresca wants to push everybody up. He played a pretty, you know, attacking brand, but you wanted to control. But he also wants center backs who can get back quickly. You know, athletic center backs that can get back quickly, that can be aggressive. He loves winning those, you know, balls high up the pitch after possession loss. Cucurella was big in that, but Wesley Fofana was big in that, right? Wesley's aggressive style. Now, I remember Ancelotti, right after that preseason game, told Maresca, I see what you're doing, but, you know, you might want to be a little bit more reserved with how high, you know, they're pressing up and not the high line. But I think it was a work in progress. Like you saw a much more energetic team with Wesley Fofana out there, and I just think it was all about, you know, the you know, polishing up of the style. So I unfortunately think the style of football Maresca was hoping to get towards by mid-season was predicated on a few players being fit. And they ended up not being fit. That's also the sporting director's fault because Lavia and Wesley Fofana are not players historically you can count on. So I think, you should have had insurance plans for that style. Instead, you had Tosin. For everything Tosin's good at, he's not Wesley Fofana, right? He's not going to press high up the pitch. He's not going to be aggressive like that. And then Caicedo and Enzo are brilliant, but they're not Lavia. Like Enzo could play that role, but that's not how Enzo even wants to play him. He wants Enzo to be a box crasher. Sorry, Maresca wants to play him, right? And the best way to use Caicedo is just to let him break up play every which way. So, I think he's probably had to go from one extreme to the other, but not all by choice. I think personnel has played a part. And then, like I'm saying, a lot of teams did try and play in our face. And credit to Maresca, though, Jan, because although he didn't want to play the way he played the first half of the season necessarily, he saw some approaches like from Brighton and like from West Ham first half of the season, and he knew, and I mean, this was even instructional. Remember in that West Ham game, he brought Nicholas Jackson constantly to the left-hand side to come receive the ball and to start, really spreading out the pitch, keeping the width. So I think he did adapt more than Chelsea fans want to admit this head coach is able to adapt. I just think it was like, let's try and get the results. Let's get some players' confidence. When we can get control, let's get control. But I thought he adapted. And then, like I said in the previous answer, the perfect storm happened. Right when I think he was trying to maybe, mature the team a little bit, gain a little bit more control, he had to go completely the other way to only control because teams started parking the bus all the time, and you lost Jackson and Madueke. So... Yeah, I mean,
and I think Fofana's huge as well. The way he talks about Fofana and how he play with him as well.
He loves Wesley Fofana. It's clear.
I mean, as do I. I get criticised on the channel a lot for waxing lyrical. I mean, I couldn't believe my luck when we signed him. I lined up all that. It's a great point you make that, of course, he's being presented as this Maresca ball, boring football, dogmatic, my way or the highway. But you're right to remind us that actually there's been a few games, where he's set up really intelligently to take advantage of the opposition. He doesn't seem like the kind of manager to be like, oh, I've done this and I'm really good sort of thing. Even if maybe he's not best with the media, we can talk about that maybe if we have time. There's a couple of things I want to chat about. But yes, right to highlight the fact how he will change his style for particular opposition. I think probably his idea, as he calls it, Maresca ball, if you will, I think it might not be the most high-octane, risk-taking football, but the club, the hierarchy, the project would see it as sustainable, winning football. Like if they win every game with an average 1.5 goals to nil or something like that, do you know what I mean? And they say, that's the way you get the points, baby. There's nothing sexier than winning. Doesn't matter how you do it. Yeah. And they will, by all accounts, are sticking to their guns to try and achieve that model, that style of football. And I think we both align with that. So, we've spoken about injuries being dealt as a sort of poor hand, essentially, something that we've spoken about in previous questions and answers here. I think we are both Maresca in, especially for the moment, considering everything and all the context. Before I ask you about managers generally, just to finish on Enzo Maresca, couple of questions. Firstly, do you feel like he could deal with the media better? So I'll let you answer that. And then to follow up, basically, yes, and how is he going to do that, and will he do that is the question. And do you think he can reach successful Chelsea manager potential? So I'm not talking about, Graham Potters or interims or stuff like that. I'm talking about, Conte's, Mourinho's, Ancelotti's. Can he be like that Chelsea manager? So those two questions before the last question.
Yeah, on the media one, probably, right? He probably could deal with the media better. It's a really confusing one, though, because I think when we were doing really well under Maresca, even before we started doing really well under Maresca and like we were right out of preseason, he came across as a pretty honest Italian Chelsea head coach, right? Yes. The ones that we really do love, generally, personality-wise. I mean, even him kind of, I don't want to say calling out Reece James, but like asking for more leadership from Reece James and just how like honest he was through the media, but not in a disrespectful way. You had a feeling that anything he said through the media, he was also saying privately to players. So it wasn't like behind the players' back. But
well, the players seem to like him. Let's put that there. Like Colwell's waxing
still
lyrical.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I'm so sure, but I mean, you may have seen that clip. I've referenced it here on the channel of Eden Hazard at A-Star Barbers talking to Reece James, who's getting a trim, and he's like, "How's the new gaffer?" And Reece doesn't realise it's sort of being filmed, and he's like, "Oh yeah, much better."
Yeah, yeah.
But then he sort of realises it's being filmed, and he tones it down a little bit, like, "Well,
yeah." No, I mean, he definitely keeps an honest relationship with his players, and they have a lot of respect for how he talks to them. Remember, last season at Leicester City, I know they had a little bit of a hump in the middle of the season, but when they did win the title, they all went over to Maresca's house at 3 a.m., right?
Yeah.
Like there is a camaraderie there between Maresca and his players where I think Colwell just said it the other day, though, like, you also don't want to be on his bad side. Like, he can be stern with you, so I do think there's a good balance there behind closed doors. I think publicly, I think he's been a little bit hurt by the fact that, let's be real, he is in some way, shape, or form talking for the directors and the owners as well. And I think it's putting him in a really almost like bipolar situation where sometimes he's like speaking as Enzo Maresca, and then sometimes he's absolutely just kind of being the company guy, maybe remembering, on the goalkeepers, I need to say they're both good.
Which apparently he isn't inclined to do. So we know he doesn't want to be a yes man. Like at Leicester, he was like, "I've just won you the title. Don't swear on his channel. I'll effing walk." Do you know what I mean? Whatever.
Yep.
But now there is an element of, I've had one season in the Championship, and this is the Chelsea job. So toe the line a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I just think him with the media is really uneven right now, and I don't think you'll get the full Enzo Maresca, like the real Enzo Maresca in the media until, I hate to say this, but maybe year 3.
Wow.
I just think it's going to take a little bit of time, and I've always suggested for this season to fans, I wouldn't overly read into what he says, positively or negatively, right? Like, just go off of how the players feel about him, and that's as much as I can say on that. Now, do I think he can become a successful Chelsea head coach was the next question.
Yep.
I really do, but he just obviously has to be given the trust. I am so desperate, Jan, to see a head coach at Chelsea just make year 2. I really am. Like, I would just like to see a year 2. I think no matter what, the squad will be better and deeper next season. We had fake depth at the start of this season, right? And what I mean by that is obviously when you play Noah in the Euro Conference League, a João Felix and a Dewsbury Hall, they're going to look pretty damn good. But I don't think it's real depth because that's not depth that was really fitted for Maresca necessarily. Sure. I think next season, I think the directors will have to do it, right? Like, they'll start to actually have some backups that are still for Maresca. You'll have a Stelao, you'll have, I guess, a Sugo backing up Caicedo, right? You should have
Santos.
Andre Santos. Thank you.
Massive
flaw of mine to even forget him for a second. But that's a big one. That's a massive one.
Big. Yeah. Just on that as well. Like, on the depth, because we had lots of talented players. Well, like a Chelsea squad, really good. Cole Palmer and Nkunku and Jackson, and they've signed these midfielders, and there's a lot of greatness in there. But I think because it's such a radical change from Pochettino, because there's a lot of still cleaning out old stock and doing the whole PSR thing, they're really trying to get a new base level of just for cool player stock. But it almost is that, isn't it? Like, they need to now all the assets we know, they can play for us, they can play for Strasbourg, they come from the academy, they all play the same, they're all aligned up, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now we've got rid of everything we know doesn't work. João Felix, like you say, it wasn't just a George Mendes thing, it was a Conor Gallagher deal sweetener as well, wasn't it? Because it was either Samu or Felix, so it was one of those. All these kind of things they're learning from, Nkunku, it was a different time when thinking differently. Now it's like, right, Maresca, these type of wingers, these type of one-on-one wingers, high volume, winning 1v1s, back up when he drops this for that, a big striker, right, less excuses, more like, it's still a learning curve. Like, to be like, to qualify, it's no given because of the teams around us, but if we do finish top 5 and win the conference with a 100% record, winning every single game, That's hella good for a season where you're still learning what will work for this manager. Right?
Youngest team in the league. I can't keep stressing that. Like,
yeah,
that's...
I know that's a bit of a dirty phrase now, but it's true, isn't it? It's just it's you've got to take that into account.
And it's not even close, by the way, in terms of us being the youngest team in the league. Like, you know, you look at the rest of the pack. I always look on FBref, like the ages, and they're all separated by just, you know, decimals. And then, like, we're separated by, like, at least a whole year or something from the next youngest.
Bournemouth or something next.
And that's really important because I know, like, a lot of people want to highlight the fact that PSG have also one of the top 5 youngest teams in the European top 5 leagues. But, you know, they got Marquinhos, they got Donnarumma, they got Vitinha, they got, like, you know, some players. I'm not saying all those guys are old. I don't think Vitinha's that old.
Sure, but they've also got... You know, Dembele is 27, who's like now hitting the form of his life, life, and you know, and they're buying like, you know, you can look at a Doué as like, you know, maybe an Esteval coming in, although Esteval hasn't played in Europe. Do you know what I mean? So there is that. I think we're aligned. Next season, not only are we going to have we won't have like perhaps the egos that don't want to be here anymore, and no disrespect to Nkunku, well, a bit of disrespect for Nkunku in terms of his attitude sometimes, but you know, he needs, he's a great player, he's a lovely player, he needs to go and do his thing. Joao Felix does seem like football's orphan. I think Galatasaray is calling him, he's got all the Turkish football written all over him. You know, so we've got the young players that are doing really well that want to go and play for Chelsea now, like your Estevals, you know, Paes, Santos.
Andre Santos, that's a big one. Yeah.
Huge, because he's, you know, Ligue 1 isn't that dissimilar to the Premier League in many ways, and he's just looks like he can be such an important contributor, a bit of a leader. Yeah. So I think we're aligned on. It should get better, not just with the players we've got on the books to come in, but with a couple of key signings as well. Yeah. And yes, backing Maresca, but just for the sake of it, before we wrap up, there are people that just simply won't be into Enzo Maresca as a manager. And football, of course, is a game of opinions, you know. I'm very much one of these content creators that I never gatekeep, you know, what I think's right. And maybe that's probably why. Maybe if I was a little bit more aggressive, I'd get more views. I was a little bit more philosophical. So let's just say it doesn't work out with Maresca. Do you think there's another manager? Because there'll be people like, he's not good enough, get him out. I don't think. I'm very much Maresca in for all the reasons we've discussed. But if we were both to play devil's advocate, just for the sake of it, and say, right, he needs to just manage somewhere else, he's for one reason or other, one of his flaws accentuates and it doesn't work. Is there another manager that comes into Chelsea, picks these players up and just makes Chelsea really, really good? And an attainable manager that would work, again, really importantly, would work within the parameters that will be afforded to them, you know?
Right. The problem is like, I have to think under the realistic guidelines that Chelsea are hiring a head coach, not a manager.
Yep.
They're hiring someone that doesn't have too much experience in the game, because anybody with a lot of experience in the game isn't going to want to come in and be a head coach under these parameters, right?
True.
So, you know, like I saw some people yesterday. I mean, this was jokes. I'm not taking this overly seriously, but I did see some people say, like, you know, let's just buy Ancelotti out of the job at Real Madrid. And I just used that as an example of, like, are we forgetting the fact that guys like Ancelotti, or even like half of an Ancelotti, they're not going to want to be working under Winston Lee and Stewart.
No, I mean, you know? I love Carlo. His Chelsea was my favourite Chelsea, but we were like a Galactico team, and he is a Galactico whisperer.
Yeah,
you know? A bit like Zidane, but probably. I mean, we don't know how good Zidane is. We will never know how good Zidane is. But like an amazing, you know, player manager, Galactico whisperer. Give him superstars that cost 100 million each and pay them 400k a week, and he'll get the best out of them. Obviously, that's not happening at Chelsea. So, and also, Carlo just needs to retire. So it's a silly thing to say.
Real should be the last stop for him. Honestly, you know, he should ride off on his white horse. But you know, you obviously have names like Xabi Alonso, but I don't think Xabi Alonso would want to come at this point and
exactly. So that's entitlement, saying, because Xabi Alonso could go to Real Madrid, he played for them. He could be the successor to Carlo. In fact, that makes the most sense. Yeah. If it was Bayern, Liverpool, or Real for Xabi Alonso, you know, Liverpool's got on the slot. I think Bayern probably. I mean, it could be Bayern. but what about like an Andoni Iraola, who's obviously flavour of the month?
Okay, so I was, you know, I think the most popular Premier League shouts I hear are Iraola And then every once in a while I hear Thomas Frank, right? Because he does well at Brentford. But, this is my holdup, is like, it is so much different to succeed with a Bournemouth or a Brentford than it is with a Chelsea. And
100%.
when you lose a couple games or draw a couple games that you should win at Bournemouth or Brentford, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. You're Bournemouth and Brentford. And then when you win, it's like, oh my God, you're doing wonders, right?
Do you know what the best example of that is? Unai Emery.
Right.
PSG, Arsenal, really, really criticised heavily, seen as like a bit of a failure. Villarreal, Sevilla, now Aston Villa. He gives them the keys, he's king of the castle, he's the best coach in the world. So people understandably act emotionally and they just say names, but they have to sort of give their heads a wobble and have a think, and then obviously they just channel their anger. Well, it's Chelsea, we screwed everything up, it's not going to work, yada, yada, yada. But they're obviously just shouting for the sake of shouting, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
if you want to go for vibes, if you just want to go purely for vibes, you just say, hey, Cesc, I like what you're doing over in Italy, Come on. But I don't even think that's the best move for Cesc, No,
100%. 100%. And that's the thing. Like the vibe, there's like a vibes trio that probably none of them would work. Of course, there's the Frank Lampard remontada doing amazing things. And I 100% understand how he's connected with everyone. Derby, Everton,
Coventry.
Chelsea. He connects with the fans and he takes them with him. So Frank, he's a super intelligent Frank, and he's got emotional and social intelligence which serves him well. So they're seeing what he's doing with Coventry, and they're like, Frank, like you say, Cesc, there's something quite exotic and sexy about Cesc because, it's Barcelona, Spain, the international trophy winner, Chelsea, multiple Premier League titles, and there's something quite cool and cultured about Cesc. Obviously, Frank's amazing, but there's that sort of a little bit more exotic.
Well, yes, Cesc got blended. You know what I mean? Like, Cesc got blended because he had so many different top coaches in different countries, So he might have got, from a managerial perspective, a little bit more to bring to the table than Frank, only because Frank was kind of ingrained in the same culture the whole time.
So Frank did have an influence with amazing managers, loads of them, but I know what you mean. Culturally, it's different with us. Yeah. And then maybe bottom of the barrel, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, is Liam Rosenier at Strasbourg as well, who's highly rated, and
I will say, and I'm not at all vouching for Rosenior to come here and be our head coach because I want Maresca to continue, but I have been very impressed by Rosenior this season. They, very similar to Maresca at the start of the season, it was basketball for Strasbourg. It was just straight up basketball, and he went through some of the same hardships of like, hey, I want to put my players on a pedestal here where they can, really attack and show what they got. I don't have great defenders, or at least experienced defenders. Again, youngest team in the league, youngest team in all top 5 leagues.
5 leagues, yeah.
So,
and then it's Chelsea afterwards? Is it them then Chelsea? Or
it's them then Chelsea. Them then Chelsea. Yeah. So, but what he has done, and now he's getting clean sheets. I mean, the way he's kind of compacted the team, but still allowed guys like Diego Moreira and Omega, the striker, to be able to go forward and attack and keep still like a tighter defense in transition. Petrovic has looked really good.
Yes.
There was a clip on X, and take it with a grain of salt, right? But it was this awesome, and I know he doesn't really speak great French, so he's got a translator. But it was this really cool, post-game speech from Rosenior, and it was pretty moving. I can't lie. So the guy seems talented, at least.
Yeah. I mean, don't write it. He's young. He's like 40 or something, isn't he? So don't write it off. So there you go. We that's sort of due diligence just by talking about other coaches for people who perhaps aren't 100% convinced on Maresca. But look. It's been a difficult period. We're going into an international break. Players should come back refreshing. It's a hard run at the end of the season, but we ain't done yet. So we're going to learn a lot about Maresca and the players, what we need and what we've got by the end of the season. But I think that pretty much wraps us up, man. So I'll thank you so much for jumping on. It's been insightful and fun chatting to you about Chelsea and Maresca. And I'll certainly be jumping on your show soon on Playback. Man, do you wanna shout out how to get to your Playback channel and stuff, or where to find it? Presumably easy.
Just go to my Twitter, honestly. Just go to Alex Goldberg on Twitter or on X, whatever it's called, and then you'll find my Playback because I do a daily stream. Yeah.
There you go. It's a lot of fun. You get loads of great people on there, loads of big content creators, and you get to interact as well. It's super fun. So Go check that out. And yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it.